Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health.
Good morning, I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, 'tis the season to curl up with a good book, emphasis on good. To help us select that choice read are 4 experts in the field this morning. Later in the program, we'll discuss the child literacy goals behind a new Story Walk segment of the city's Emerald Trail. But first, time is short and nobody has time to spare on a less than stellar book, which is why a good recommendation carries as much or more weight than a review. To discuss it, we're joined by 4 trusted voices in the literary world. Rhona Brinlee, owner of the BookMark in Neptune Beach. Good morning, Rhona.
Good morning. Great to be here.
Angie Nixon, state representative and owner of Cafe Resistance Bookstore on Sutel Drive. Hey, Angie.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Erika Alfieri, metadata and cataloging librarian with the Jacksonville Public Library. Good morning, Erika.
Hey, good morning.
And Tricia Booker joins us on the line. She is a UNF journalism instructor and author of The Place of Peace and Crickets. Good morning, Tricia. That's my bad. Good morning, Tricia. I want to start with you, Angie, just your take. I mean, what makes for a good book?
What makes for a good book for me? I like things that educate me as well as captivate me and captivate the reader and just leaves me wanting to learn more about it. And then sometimes just a form of escapism. I'm really into Black futurism right now, Afrofuturism, because, you know, this world right now is going a little nuts. And so it's a great way to escape.
Yeah. And both you and Rhona own bookstores. So you're in the business of making recommendations a lot. How do you assess somebody's need when it comes to a book? How do you help them meet it?
Yeah, for sure. So when we have customers that come in, we kind of ask what they're feeling, what are they interested in? And, you know, sometimes when folks say they want some self-help things, sometimes it's just they're feeling overwhelmed. And so we ask them, just like I stated earlier, do they want to escape? Do they want to learn some historical things? And then that's the way we make our recommendations from there.
And for people who aren't familiar with your bookstore, I mean, it is a specialty bookstore in the sense that it
Yes.
focuses on Black literature and the story of Black America.
Right. The story of not only oppression, but like the story of resistance. And oftentimes folks are taught that Black history starts at slavery, and that's not just the case, really. Our people, well, some of us, right, we come from an amazing people, right? We weren't just born on the water. We had our own native tongue. We had our own religions. And so we have that type of information in the bookstore so people can learn about it.
Yeah. And Rhona, your bookstore, I mean, it certainly specializes in great books. It is not is not as specific as the purpose of Cafe Resistance. How do you assess a reader's need when they come into the bookstore, and what kind of questions do you ask to help them find the right book?
Well, so that's what we do all day. When you say what is a great book, it's different for everybody. So the idea that there's one book that everybody's going to like. So our goal is to match the perfect book with that reader. So we start with, what do you like to read? And sometimes they say, I don't know, I don't read. I'm just trying to get started. Well, what movies do you watch? You know, things like that, to give some idea of what they're interested in. So for gift giving, that becomes really important to sort of, well, like, what does your mother like? Or, you know, you don't want to sell somebody something that's going to get them upset or has something in it that reflects on their life that they don't want to revisit. So that's what we do all day. That's the fun part, is matching the reader and the book.
Absent that perfect match, do you have just like your top book this year that you think everybody could or should read?
No, I don't think there is that book, actually. I think that that's what's fun about it. And that's what's fun about an independent bookstore, is that you get to make those matches. You don't have to depend on the national trend of what's the hot book, what's number one on the New York Times. It doesn't really matter. We report to the New York Times. It's always fun to see that we don't match their list. We have our own. We like to think we influence the reading habits of the nation, of course, but, you know, we have our own list, and people have their own books to read. And so it'd be silly to think that there's one book that everybody should read, that one book.
Yeah. Erika, you work at the library. I mean, how do you match the tastes of people who looking for something to read with the mission of the library overall?
Ooh, so a lot of times when people come in, they're either trying to look for a book for a reluctant reader, like a child, and sorry, dads, but a dad who isn't that into books. I really like to go with nonfiction for those readers, which might be kind of a curveball, but a lot of times, like Rona was saying, if you can find out what someone's interested in, there's a book for that. So if you want to learn to hike or how to build a bicycle or go bird watching, we've got books for all those things.
I want to start with sort of a couple of themes that I noticed on the book lists that you all sent me of things that you're reading. And we should say both of our bookstore owners brought a pile of books that are stacked behind them on our shelf. So there's a
Sorry.
lot of books to consider today. Um, but one thing that I thought was really interesting, and Trish, I'll get you in just a second, but I want to go back to Rona for a second. This retelling of Bel Canto, which is one of the Ann Patchett, one of her early books, a classic, an extraordinary book.
Right.
She actually reissued it with an annotated, an annotated version of
Right.
it, critiquing her own writing.
It's a large format book, so it looks like a coffee table kind of a gift book, and it is annotated. And the funny part, it starts with the introduction and the dedication. And she said when she first wrote it, she dedicated to some guy who was just her boyfriend, and that was the gutsiest thing to do. But now they're married, so it's okay. She rededicated it to him, so it worked out
She
okay.
didn't take that out. That's
She didn't
a
take
good
that
sign.
out. No, that's a good sign. No, but she goes through and she makes comments on like, what was I thinking here? I shouldn't have put this in here. And it's all in her handwriting. And so if you were a fan of that book, as I was, it was an amazing book that, just spoke to the times too. You can see what she was thinking when she wrote it. And when she went back to it, what she was thinking, whether it still made sense or she would have done it differently now. And the fact that it's in her handwriting makes it fun. We all annotate books that we want to keep and go back to our notes. And sometimes they're kind of funny to look at after all those years.
And Trisha, I want to ask you about this. I don't know that this is a book that you've read. I know you've read Bel Canto, but as an author, I mean, she has described the experience of going back and reading something that's already been published as sort of excruciating, and that this was an exercise she really had to kind of push herself into. I saw in one interview she said she had used the word flutter like 8 times in the book, and she just found it intolerable that she hadn't self-corrected that. Is that something that you can relate to at all as somebody who's been published and perhaps had a chance to
Oh
go back?
man, I mean, Ann Patchett is a writer's writer, man, and this is the bravest thing that you could do is put out there her kind of her regrets about the way she wrote the first book, which of course was brilliant. But the idea that she is able to go back and say, yeah, this was really good. This is maybe how I would do it now as a more mature writer. I just think it's amazing. It's such a gift to readers, but also to other writers.
One of the books that was on your list, Trisha, it was on a lot of top 10 lists this year. It was also on Rona's recommendation list, is James, which is a retelling of the Huck Finn story. And so it's another kind of look back at an existing story and then taking another bite at it. But it really has been appreciated as a true creation and classic of literature on its own.
It is so good. One of the things that I love about many of the books that were big sellers this year is that they can teach people about current events, but also about history in a way that is interesting and that they might not otherwise learn. I mean, as a journalist, at a time when journalism is really taking a back seat for many people, they're not reading as much of the news, that they can read good literature, great literature that teaches them something about history and about things that are going on in the world is amazing. And in James, the people of color have 2 different kind of personalities that they put forth. They have the people that they are and the ways that they interact with each other. But then they have a completely different front and that they put on for their masters, for the owners and for the people that they are beholden to. And it's just a fascinating way to look at slavery and to just kind of rehumanize the times of slavery.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Another book that was on your list, which it wasn't actually a 2024 book, but you noted, Trisha, that it came out really late in the year, so of 2023, is Demon Copperfield, which is, or Demon Copperhead, I'm sorry, which is kind of, in a way, a retelling of David Copperfield. What was it about that book that so appealed to you?
Well, she told the whole story. It's a long book. Barbara Kingsolver wrote the book in the voice of the main character, and he's a kid, and so it reflects the way he speaks and the way he thinks is very childlike throughout. And the story is about the opioid crisis. I mean, you get invested in the story because you kind of fall in love with this character who is just put through the ringer as a child and as a young adult. But he also becomes an addict, and you begin to see the fractures, the societal fractures in the way we handle addiction. I think that book it broke a lot of hearts, but it certainly, again, it taught a lot of people about the drug crisis in a way that perhaps news stories don't necessarily do.
Angie, I want to talk to you about some local authors because your picks this year were kind of heavy on local authors. Start us with a couple names that we know really well, Nat Glover and
Yes.
Rodney Hurst.
Yeah, so um, Sheriff Glover actually came striving for justice. He came and he did a book signing and also just talked about the book and just his experience and his life. And so I wanted to really showcase local authors and local heroes because what's interesting is oftentimes you don't know the history. What I have witnessed is folks here in Jacksonville don't even know the breadth of history and the the greatness that comes out of Jacksonville. And so I just wanted to create a space where folks can learn that, right? And so we have Sheriff Glover's book, Striving for Justice. We also have a ton of Rodney Hurst's books, one of which is Black and Brilliant. And I really started my bookstore not just because books were being banned and challenged, but because oftentimes our children or the Black community don't realize that we are amazing, and that we come from great things. And so Black and Brilliant is an excellent book, particularly for Generation Z and the younger millennials and Generation Alpha. It teaches about the civil rights movement and how young leaders were the ones that sparked that movement. And so that's amazing. And then also I want to give a shout out to Mr. Warren King, who wrote My Journey from Dozier School. He is someone who frequents the bookstore. He loves our smoothies, but he wrote a book. He actually was released from prison a few years ago, but he wrote a book about his life in the Dozier School for Boys, where he was beaten and abused. And there actually Senator Davis helped lead legislation that is going to allow those individuals to get some monetary money because of, being abused. And so
And
I
that
just want
story
people to
was
know.
fictionalized by Colson Whitehead in
Yes,
the Nickel
yes,
Boys, which I
yes.
think is a new movie
hmm
even.
Yes.
But so this is his
This
story.
is his story. And I invite everyone to come out and listen, like pick it up and also talk to him because he's there almost every day.
If you're just joining us, we are talking with four very literate folks in town here about their best year of recommendations, what you can get, what you could pick up for the holidays. And if you'd like to join our conversation, you're welcome to give us a call at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org or reach out on social media. We've got a call from Roselle in Avondale. Good morning, Roselle. Go ahead.
Hi, ladies. I worked for Rhona years ago, and I've been spending a lot of time in Angie's bookstore and Cafe Resistance. One of the things that I'm really excited about Angie's store is that she doesn't mention it much, but she does after-school tutoring, and the kids are coming for music lessons, and it's become, she's always having events, free events, often free food, which is kind of, I don't know how she pulls that out of her hat. And she has speakers. I heard a speaker recently who was very involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s. And it was fascinating to hear this gentleman speak. He's a college professor, and I forgot his name, Angie, but the best thing about the bookstore is of Angie's bookstore. It's almost like a library where people go to see people and gather. It's a safe space. It's got beautiful artwork. It's got delicious coffee, and it's just exciting for that community that's been so long overlooked
Sure.
and redlined, et cetera. So
Thanks, Roselle.
congratulations, Angie, on your new store. And hi, Rhona.
Hello.
I want to ask you about one more local author. Angie it's a book about a local hero, really, Maureen Betch of American
Yes.
Beach. And It's called Saving American Beach,
Yes.
but it's a children's book.
It's a children's book. And, I met the beach lady while I was in elementary school. And I'm so sad that she's not around still. But this book is available. It is so colorful. And it teaches the children just about how amazing of an environmentalist and activist that she was. And again, like, she's from here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's an extraordinary woman, no longer with us, but it is a beautiful book. It's actually illustrated by a Caldecott Award
Hmm.
honoree, Yuka Holmes. Um, I want to ask you, in talking about children's books, Erica, you recommended a few on your list that were either for children or young adults. What picks are you recommending this year?
Yeah, so for kids, I'm recommending this holiday season that you check out the How to Catch series. I love to recommend a series for children because it kind of answers the question of what do we read next. How to Catch stars a group of kids called the How to Catch Kids as they go on hijinks trying to capture mythical creatures to prove that they're real. So each book follows them trying to catch an elf, a talking snowman, or reindeer for the Christmassy ones. But there are tons to read throughout the year where they try to catch mermaids and unicorns and all sorts of other critters.
And then your young adult book was actually part of like a Japanese manga series. Is that right?
Yeah, and if you're not familiar with manga, it's illustrated books at a higher reading level, so they do still have great vocabulary for those parents who might be concerned that their kids are just consuming comics. Um, and I want to recommend Witch Hat Atelier, which stars a girl named Coco who wishes that she could do magic, but she lives in a world where you have to be born with it. Until one day she finds out that might not be true. Coco goes on an adventure where she lives in an atelier with other students, and it's a really sweet series about facing challenges as a group, friendship, sticking together, and defying the odds.
Rona, one of the books that you recommended is also a young adult. It's a mystery called Darkly. Why did that land on your list?
Well, I read it recently because the author, Marisha Pessl, wrote this amazing book years ago called Special Topics in Calamity Physics, which is a great title. And she's just this inventive author when she includes pictures of letters and newspaper clippings in the books. And so I thought it would be fun to read a young adult book. And I'd also just read Murakami, which will blow your mind. So I thought it would be a nice break. Um, and it's fantastic because you get to see the world through the perspective of kids. And these are kids who were selected from massive numbers of kids for reasons you don't find out till later to solve a problem of a missing child having to do with a game that some woman invented. And I have to say, it was twisty and I didn't figure out what was going on. And it took me a long time. I had to get all the way to the end and there were surprises the whole way. So I thought it was a great adventure and a wonderful mystery. And she stayed with her inventiveness. And so I loved it.
Well, as you say, you're influencing the reading of the nation. That also is really highly acclaimed in the New York Times. But you mentioned Murakami, and that new book. It's called The City of Uncertain Walls,
Right.
by Haruki Murakami, and he's not the most accessible author.
He's not, but he's Japanese and he is translated. And the first book I read by him was What I Talk About When I Talk About Running, which is so funny because if you look at me, I'm not really a runner, but I loved it because he said he runs 100 miles a week and every day tries to think of a reason not to run. And people say, "Are you writing your next book?" And he says, "No, the whole point is to think about nothing." So I was intrigued by this one. And this is somewhat of a retelling in that he wrote a short story in 1980 that he just didn't like. And so he decided he was getting older and he wanted to go back to it. And now it's a 400 and something page book, which is this book. And it's very trippy. You don't know what's real. A man is in love as a teenager and he tries to find this woman and she lives in this city and these walls keep moving. Does the city exist? Are the people in the book dead? Are they alive? Are there ghosts? It's just one of those things you have to say, I'm going to go along for the ride. And the language is beautiful. And just enjoy the journey. Don't try and figure it out.
Tricia, I want to ask you about one of the books that was first on your list called A Living Remedy. Tell us a little bit about that book and why that was one that you liked so much.
Well, as a memoirist, I'm always amazed at women or other memoirists who can write more than one memoir about their lives. And Nicole Chung is one of them. Her first book is called All You Can Ever Know, and it's about being an adoptee. She was adopted. She's Asian, and she was adopted by her white parents. And she talks about growing up as an adoptee in a primarily white community and what that was like for her. In her second book, The Living Remedy, it's about losing her parents, her adoptive parents, in a way that is really damaged by the healthcare system in America. So both of her parents died in ways that their lives could have been extended, and their lives could have been made a lot more comfortable toward the end if they had had better access to healthcare. And it's an intriguing story, but it's also just a kind of a devastating story, and it's really well written. I think Nicole Chung is just a beautiful, beautiful writer, and I love that she is brave enough to tell not just her story once, but to tell it twice in ways that make people pay attention.
You also recommended a local author, Tia Levings. Her book is called A Well-Trained Wife. Tell us about that and tell us about her.
Yeah, she grew up a good portion of her life in Jacksonville and was married here. She's another very brave woman, and she married into a Christian patriarchal family. She had 4 kids. She was abused and had a really tough marriage, but was not supported at all by her extended family when she tried to escape. She felt kind of hammered into this relationship and with no way out, until she finally thought, well, it's going to be me leaving, or I'm going to die here. And so she took her kids and she escaped. And the story that she writes is really kind of an outline of how patriarchy works to denigrate women and to kind of keep them under wraps.
Yeah.
And I'm just very proud of her as a fellow writer and as just somebody who I just think has really been an amazing storyteller when it comes to explaining to people how this religious system works.
Angie, while we're on the subject of kind of more serious topics, one of your recommendations was This Nonviolent Stuff Will Get You Killed.
Yes.
How Guns Made the Civil Rights Movement Possible. It's by Charlie Cobb. Tell us
Yes.
a little bit about it.
So yes, actually, this is the author that Roselle was talking about earlier. So this book is
Who spoke at the
yes, who
cafe?
spoke at the cafe, correct. This book is just basically about his life as a civil rights activist, as a field secretary in SNCC, back in Mississippi
It's
in the
Student
60s.
Nonviolent
Yes,
Coordinating
coordinating committee, correct. He talks about Fannie Lou Hamer. He met her and things like that, and just that they were risking their lives trying to get equality. And so it's a really good read. It pushes back against privilege and lets folks know what folks had to go through. And he was a young man, right? Like when he went down to Mississippi, he was born and raised in D.C., and then he wanted to do more. And so doing more, he put his life on the line to fight for equality for those in Mississippi.
While we're talking history, Rhona, a couple of historical fictions landed on your list, including this book, The Wealth of Shadows by Graham Moore, which has been getting a lot of attention as well. Tell us about it. It's really an extraordinary story.
It's really one of my favorite books of the year, and it's historical fiction, but you read the end notes and 90-something% of it's true. So most of it's true, and it's about a tax attorney in 1939 who goes to the Treasury Department who says, I know we don't want to get into the war, but I think that we can beat the Nazis by bankrupting Germany. And then the government actually formed a secret committee, and John Maynard Keynes was part of it, a Russian spy infiltrated. And all this is true, and they're trying to make the dollar the currency of the world and how they can stay neutral, but bankrupt Germany, which obviously it didn't work. We had to go to war. But it's an amazing story, and the fact that it's true is so compelling.
And the author, Graham Moore, really excavated this person from history. I mean,
Yeah.
he said you couldn't find his name, Ansel Lunsford, in any
No.
Google search. He just didn't exist.
Right. Nobody ever heard of him. And he's really good at writing historical fiction. But this was a great one because it is somebody that we never heard of. It's not trying to resurrect somebody that we all know and telling a different story. This is a wholly new story.
Yeah. Erika, one of the adult books that was on your list is called Legends and Lattes. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify, I was asked for cozy reads. But yeah,
You have a whole other list of serious reads.
I do. They're sitting next to my bed. But Legends and Lattes is a story of Viv the orc, who is part of a kind of Dungeons and Dragons-esque adventuring party. and she's tired of the adventuring life. She decides to hang up her greatsword and open a cafe in a fantasy town. It's a really sweet, soft book. There's a romance subplot for you adults out there, and it follows her finding a found family, building her cafe, the way her community supports her. It's just a really affirming, sweet read, and it's got luscious scenes, delicious pastries, hot beverages, a warm fire, and friends.
And it also, I mean, it doesn't take itself too seriously. The subtitle of this is a novel of high fantasy and low stakes.
Yes. So when there are struggles, it's small stuff that you can kind of relax into the read and kind of rest this holiday season.
Um, I'm interested to know what is on your bookshelf or on your nightstand right now, Tricia Booker. I mean, what are you going to be picking up next?
I'm going to be picking up all of the books that I asked my children to give me for Christmas, and I'm hoping that they appear.
If they deliver.
Yes, one of the ones that I'm very interested in reading is Martyr. Rhona, remind me of the author.
Oh, I can't remember his name. I'd have to look it up. It's AK something, but yes.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm looking at.
All right.
That's a good one.
Um, I have to say, one of my favorite books of the year was an author we actually had on, and is another local author, writing in this case under the name Michael George. His name is Michael Wiley, and he's a professor at UNF. But he did a book that's told in verse, which sounds weird, and I think a lot of people think, but it is an incredible book. It's called Find Your Own Way Home, and I definitely would recommend that to anybody that is looking for a gift book that is dark. I mean, don't make any mistake; it is not the kind of like cheery Christmas or holiday book that some people might like. Talk, if you would, a little bit, Angie, about what is on your next year list. What are you looking to acquire? What are you hoping to bring into the bookstore in terms of speakers?
Yeah, for sure. So I always love bringing in more local authors. And I also want to try to go after a few celebrity folks. Our first big book signing was with Ricky Smiley. And so that was amazing. And then also we have Danielle, who has, Danielle Lewis, I believe is her name. But she wrote The Day God Saw Me as Black. We were supposed to bring her in December. Things got a little crossed, but I'm looking forward to her coming in. That is a good book especially for Black women, if they're struggling with their spirituality and that type of thing. It's a really good read. And then I also will continue to have our local book readings with our superheroes to get the children to love reading. We actually had Black Panther and Spider-Man reading to the kids, as well as Storm. And then we also had a Princess Tea party where Elsa and Princess Tiana read to the kids as well. So it is a community hub, and we're really trying to promote literacy in an area where the literacy rates are low.
Yeah, Erika, what about the library in terms of literacy events or just reading events?
Yeah, you can always head to jackspubliclibrary.org and click on the events tab. Every branch is going to have something a little different for you, and there are programs for each age group. So we do the young readers who are just learning to hold a book all the way up through adults.
We got a message from Katie on Facebook. Just says, Rhona and Angie, both of your bookstores are my favorites. Love this discussion. Rhona, I just want to ask you the same question. I mean, what's going on in the new year at the BookMark in terms of author events?
Well, we have our first author event will be with Fiona Davis. She does great historical fiction. She takes an iconic building in New York and has something in the past and something in the present. So she's been very popular. We have Corrine Payton, who is a romance author, coming. We have Mark Mustian, who does also great historical fiction, coming. We do an event with Jacksonville Now called Rhona Recommends, where I get up and pontificate about books by and about women. So that's always fun. So there's always something. Again, we have a website too, bookmarkbeach.com, and you can find all those great events, and they just keep coming. It's wonderful to bring that to the community.
Yeah, and don't forget your independent bookstores. Don't forget the library as a resource. We did get an email from somebody who wants some of these titles in a place where they can read them and look up the authors or whether or not they want to get them. And so we'll be posting the complete list of the books that we talked about later this morning on the First Coast Connect website.
And And
But
purchase them from us.
yeah, definitely support your local bookstores. This is not a plug for Amazon by any means. This is a time to put some money back in the pockets of people in the local community. Angie Nixon, Rhona Brinlee, Erika Alfieri, Tricia Booker, thank you all so much for either coming in or joining us by phone.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy holidays to everyone.